Government pensions made the former vice president a millionaire in 2019, but he really cashed in after the 2020 election forced him back into the private sector. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, wealth reporter Matt Durrell. Matt, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Brittany.
Matt, you wrote about the finances of former Vice President Mike Pence. So point blank, how much is he worth?
Yeah, so based on his latest financial disclosure, which he just, released recently, given that he's, running to be president, we estimate that he's now worth about $4 million, which is, nearly 4 times as much as he was back in 2019, the last time we looked, when he was obviously still in office.
He made 4 times the amount of money in just a few years. How'd he do it?
As a lot of people do when they leave office, they do a lot of speaking and they write memoirs. So he's done both. He's delivered something like 30 speeches just since the beginning of 2022, and I think from that he earned just over $3 million. And then just in terms of advance payments over that same period of time for his book, So Help Me God, he got another just over $1 million. So that was, the bulk of the cash he's pulled in since leaving office.
I do want to take a step back here, maybe to Mike Pence's roots, the early start of his career. Was he always this wealthy?
No, he was for a long time, one of the, I guess, quote unquote, poorer members of Congress. Some of them are pretty well off, but, his father played a big role in building this gas station and convenience store chain called Keel Brothers in Indiana, where Pence is from. And, at one point, he reported having stock in that company worth somewhere between $250,000 and, $500,000 or so. But then that company, which his brother had taken over, went bankrupt in the early 2000s. So for a long time, the only real assets Mike Pence had were his pensions, both for the number of years he served as a U.S. representative from Indiana, then as governor of Indiana, and then as vice president. So, not very liquid, but those actually, added up to be a lot. Those pensions are worth quite a bit. And,
do you have the numbers there? How much are these pensions worth?
Yeah, so back in 2019, before he did all this speaking and wrote his book, we figured that his pensions had grown to be worth enough to make him a millionaire, almost exactly about $1 million between the two pensions, and they're worth about the same today. So they were his only assets back then. They're still a sizable asset, a quarter of his fortune or so, but he's got some real assets now.
An interesting tidbit you had in your piece was that he actually, in the court of public opinion, was dinged a little bit for moving some money around. Can you tell that story?
Yeah, so rather than go into his quote-unquote family business right out of law school, he, pretty quickly started, trying to get into Congress. In the late 80s, early 90s, he had a series of unsuccessful runs. In the latter of those runs, there was a bit of an uproar when it was reported that he had used some of the money he'd raised for personal expenses, like a credit card, a mortgage, things along those lines, which actually wasn't illegal back then, but it was still unpopular with voters, and it's now not permissible. But yeah, so that seems to have played a role in him being unsuccessful that time around.
So now let's fast forward to present day. He leaves the White House, and how do his property and other investments add to his net worth?
Yeah, so for a long time, as far as we could tell, from when he moved into the governor's mansion of Indiana way back, I think it was in 2013, and then straight from there into the vice president's official residence, he didn't seem to own a home of his own. So shortly after leaving office, he snapped up a pretty sizable mansion in his hometown of Columbus, Indiana, which I think he bought it for about $1.9 million, and it's worth a little more than that today. But he used a pretty sizable mortgage to finance that thing. So net of the mortgage, we think that property is worth about $1 million. So again, another quarter or so of his fortune. And then the rest he's, reinvested in, some blue chip stocks, the big names, Apple, Chevron, the ones you would expect. But interestingly, certainly when people go into office, they, to avoid the appearance of trading on, the information they're privy to, they move their money into funds that sort of more broadly track the market. And he seems to have already taken that proactive step. So, yeah, the rest of his fortune, and really the bulk of his fortune, I think we estimate to be around $2 million, is tied up in a couple of mutual funds that track the broader market.
Is it normal for politicians to make the bulk of their fortune after they leave office?
Yeah, I think it is. They make respectable salaries as vice president or president, like, $250,000, I believe, for the vice president, and a little bit more than that to be president. But now you've got, guys like Obama, living in Martha's Vineyard or wherever, and, writing these books, and, that's not the result of their salaries from, government service. Yeah, I think they all, or a lot of them at least, do certainly tend to ramp up their earning power after leaving office.
Matt Rowe, thank you for your reporting.
Yep, thank you very much for having me.